President Biden? Should he have dropped out sooner, and did him not dropping out sooner hurt the brand for voters we're talking about?
It's an academic exercise that's not even worth answering. Because for me,
this is a hard question, right. And if you're not willing to answer those hard questions, how can you?
I am answering it.
Yes,
which is
it should have been irrelevant when he dropped out. The idea that we don't primary an incumbent president was a lie. It was promulgated on purpose, and the fact that so many traditional Democratic voters went along with this. We used to be the party of the free thinkers. Anyone who's ever taken civics class in the 7th grade knows you're not a spoiler if you're in a primary. Democratic Party, by suppressing that primary, open the door and let Donald Trump
But let me ask does anyone on the stage disagree with Ms. Williamson about the process?
Our problem is we trusted you all. Your job was to inform the American people about what was going on in this country. But instead of informing the American people about what's going on in this country, you asked the same kind of gotcha questions that I am so sick and tired of hearing from journalists in this country. Joe Biden did a good job as president. He got good things done. And none of you ever said it because you wanted to ask, what's wrong with Joe Biden today? What's wrong with Joe Biden today? What's wrong with Joe Biden today? And because the media didn't inform the American people about what was going on, it became impossible for us to get any message out. And because we couldn't get any message out, nobody knew what we did, and that's why we lost the damn election.
For those just joining, welcome to the Midwest Region's Democratic National Committee Officer Forum. I'm Eugene Daniels, Chief Playbook Correspondent and White House Correspondent at Politico and one of the moderators for tonight's forum for the race to lead the DNC. I'm joined by my colleagues, senior political columnist Jonathan Martin and Dasha Burns, the Politico White House Bureau Chief. This is the second of 4 scheduled forums as we get closer and closer to the DNC's winter meeting, where the committee's 448 members will vote for the officers of their party. Before we introduce the 7 candidates for chair, I'd like to go over some ground rules in order to participate today. First, candidates had to submit 40 verified DNC member signatures by January 9th. This forum will be 90 minutes this evening without breaks. We'll start with 30-second opening statements from each candidate and conclude with 30-second closing remarks from them as well. Moderators have been given exclusive control of the flow of the discussion and which questions will be posed tonight. Neither DNC staff, the candidates, or their staffs have seen the questions. DNC members from across this region submitted questions, so we will mix in some of those tonight as well. Candidates will get 2 minutes to answer questions. We, the moderators, will decide if we follow up, and we'll give 30 seconds for those follow-up answers. Crosstalk is not permitted, and we will use the mute button if we have to.
All right, now that we're all on the same page, let's begin with opening statements. The order has been chosen at random, and Governor O'Malley, we will start with you.
Thank you. To save our republic, our party must pick itself up off the mat and embark on a rapid agenda of change, not of our principles, not of our ideals, but of the way we communicate, the way we organize, and the way we engage with the American people. My name is Martin O'Malley. I'm the former governor of Maryland, and at every level, city, state, and most recently at Social Security, I've demonstrated my ability to pick organizations up off the mat and turn them around. I can do that for this party, and I will need your help. Thank you.
Hathaway.
Good evening to all those that are assembled, as well as the viewing audience. My name is Dr. Quintessa Hathaway, and I'm seeking to be the next DNC chair simply because it's time for us to usher in a new wave of leadership that resembles the greatness of America, as well as what our value systems are, to convince people the Democratic Party is the way in which we are to chart ourselves forward, as well as speak to a new Southern strategy so that we can win back that region.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder.
I'm Nate Snyder, and I believe our party needs leadership that's ready to face a crisis. As we stare down the barrel of an emboldened, radicalized GOP, we must ask ourselves, will we remain paralyzed by fear, or will we transform this crisis into a movement? I offer a new approach, grounded in the belief that mission must drive process. Unlike others you've heard from, I recognize we cannot simply tweak our tactics or adopt GOP strategies to win. We can no longer shift our food around the plate and call it a new meal. With my vision, it's about taking our paralysis from fear and turning it into progress.
Thank you. Chair Wickler.
Trump takes office in 4 days and will immediately start violating his oath. And in this moment, we need a DNC strong enough to out-communicate, out-organize, out-raise, out-compete, and out-win a GOP bent on rigging this country against working people for the benefit of a tiny group at the top. Today, I'm honored to carry the endorsement of AFSCME, of AFT, of the NEA, and of the SEIU to build a party that can unite, fight, and win across this land.
Thank you so much. Chair Martin.
Thank you for having us tonight. I'm Ken Martin, the chair of the Minnesota DFL. Everyone has their why they do politics, right? Mine is the improvement of people's lives. My mom had me, her first kid, when she was 15 years old, raising 4 kids by herself by the time she was 20. I was the first kid in my family to go to college. I didn't go to an Ivy school. I went to a state school in Kansas. I don't rub elbows with billionaires or Hollywood elites. I rub elbows with working people in union halls, on picket lines, at civil rights marches, and at protests. I'm running for chair because that's what the next DNC will look like when I'm the next chairman. That's who we're fighting for.
Ms. Williamson.
I'm Mary Ann Williamson, and we as Democrats have a very serious conversation we need to be having among ourselves. Donald Trump is not an ordinary politician. He has ushered into the United States an era of political theater, and we will not be going back. No ordinary playbook will be able to counter what this man has done. He's created an adrenaline rush in this country, and we need to do one on top of his. He is audacious with the way he lies, and we must be audacious with the way we tell the truth. That's why we will inspire, we will excite, and we will ignite a fire that will win in 26 and 28.
Mr. Paul, final word to you.
My name is Jason Paul. I'm in this race to change the conversation. We can't move the country forward when we lose 24 states by 10 points or more. We can't win simply by fighting harder. We need to think as we fight. We can't fix our brand by going on podcasts or speaking simpler language, although that would help. We need concrete plans to engage the 20 million committed Democrats, organize high schools and colleges, and hire 10,000 full-time local organizers with at least 1 per county all across the country. I offer such plans at paulfordnc.com. Thank you.
Well, the first question I have is, why are all of you guys here? Why aren't you down the street at the Future Forward chair race or whatever the next iteration of the big Democratic super PAC organization is? Because they seem to be more relevant than the DNC these days, those outside groups that have a lot of money. So I guess what I'm getting at is, how do you make the DNC chairmanship big again? How do you get back to the days of people like Bob Strauss? Who were larger political figures, Ron Brown. How can you make the DNC what it used to be going forward? We'll start with Ken Martin.
Well, first off, it's going to take someone who knows how to win again, right? And what I mean by that is, in my time at the Minnesota DFL, we have a track record of winning elections. I'm 25-0. And in order to do anything to actually make a difference in people's lives, you have to actually win. You have to build power. But it also means that we change our tactics. For us to get all those donors back that are funding Future Forward, we have to change what we're doing. Because the reason they're not investing in parties, whether it's state parties or the national party, is because they don't believe that we're effective. And we have to give them a sense that we have a plan to win. That's what I did in 2010 when I came in as the chair of the Minnesota DFL. We had just come off a historic loss, a 50-year historic loss where we lost a 40-year state Senate majority. We lost the state House majority. We barely won the governorship. We lost the longest held congressional seat in America, Democratic congressional seat in the 8th district. And what it required at that moment, when finger pointing was high, when name calling was high, when stakeholders were leaving the party, is it required a leader to bring all of our stakeholders together, from donors to elected officials and candidates to our party leaders and activists, into the room. You see, the job of a party chair is to get everyone in this party, in this big tent party of ours, into the same boat, rowing towards the same direction, towards the same goal. And part of that is giving them confidence that you have a plan to win, not just now, but for the future, which is why I have a 10-year vision on how we actually win again. And that's what I'll do on day one when I'm chair, is bring all of our stakeholders together, do a post-election review, figure out what happened in this election, then put a plan together to put us on track to win again. That's how you go big, by making sure people have a sense that you know what what the heck you're doing because you've already done it. I rebuilt and turned around the Democratic Party in Minnesota, and we haven't lost since. And that's what's going to bring people back to the fold.
Thanks, Chair. Governor O'Malley. Governor O'Malley.
We don't have 10 years. I've rolled out a 100-day plan to jumpstart our heart as a party. Because make no mistake about it, the race is coming up right now in Virginia, in New Jersey, and the midterms coming up in 2 years are going to determine whether or not we have a republic on the other side of what we've done to ourselves now for the second time. We have to make changes, and one of those big changes that I've heard from everybody is, and this is from the people of the governing body of the DNC, the most common complaint I hear, nobody listens to me. And you know what? There were a lot of people at their kitchen tables all across Detroit and Baltimore and other places in America that felt like we weren't listening to them either. And so they stayed home. Or some of them hit the refresh button because when we said to them defending democracy, what they heard was status quo. And they're not happy with the status quo. We don't have 10 years. We need a DNC chair for this wartime footing who can use, Jonathan, the great power that people like Bob Strauss, Ron Brown, and others had to make our party big, the convening authority. And that is why on my 100-day plan, within the first month, I will convene in every region of our great country, state chair and county chair forums, so we can listen to each other. You want to know how to turn around a big organization that's down on its luck and down on itself and no longer believing it can win elections? It begins by listening to people. Talk to the people on the front lines doing the work.
Thanks, Governor.
They'll tell you.
Dr. Hathaway.
It is going to take extensive litigation. From what I've seen, even when I filed my amicus brief back in 2023, there was an absence of the Democratic National Committee when it came to addressing racial and partisan gerrymandering cases. So that will be a part of the first 100 days I too plan to implement if given the opportunity to be the next chair. We have to participate in this process so that we can win back votes because so many votes have been stolen, so many voter suppression tactics have been occurring. Next, we have to be willing to influence litigation. Although this position does not have a legislative component to it, we as Democrats are able to influence our legislators, utilize our think tanks as well as those that craft the legislation in order to carry that out. Social activation. My history, part of my background has been not only community activism, but also social activism. Upon the ascension for me to be the DNC chair, we are going to march across this country from governor's mansions to state legislatures as a force. Next, also mass voter registration. We will partner with organizations as well as individuals to get 1 million of 10 million new registrants across this country, as well as mass mobilization and communication. People are wanting to know what Democrats actually stand for in this country. Not to be talked down to, but to be more inclusive and representative of where we stand as a party. Not only must we inspire hope and motivation, but do the real tangible things that touch people's lives to let them know that the Democratic Party is the best path forward for us to have the strongest democracy possible, not just domestically, but globally.
Thanks so much. Chair Wickler, the question was about making the DNC chairmanship big again, making the job relevant again. How do you do that?
We should be honest. There is a risk. There's a risk that the DNC, as it often is for people, feels like a backwater, that it's irrelevant, that it's full of rivalries and resentments and rumors and intra-party conflict that has nothing to do with the lives of working people across this country. That people who want to fight and make a difference will not look at the Democratic Party as the place that they can go to have those fights. If we want to change that, we need a chair who's an organizer first, who understands that people are looking for hope, and the way that hope is created is through taking action together in fights that matter. That has been my life's work. When the Affordable Care Act was on the chopping block, Trump's #1 priority, I was able at Move On to work with unions, with grassroots groups, with people with disabilities, with leaders in Congress, in both chambers, with Democrats across the country to unite and fight and organize 23,000 protests. And we fought so hard that the GOP backed down. I moved home to Wisconsin. I moved into the house where I grew up, and I ran for Democratic state party chair in a state that Republicans had rigged for total control. Even when they lost elections, they executed power grabs. They suppressed black voters and young voters. They had rigged our maps. And working with our amazing Governor Evers and our elected officials and our grassroots activists, we have fought year over year. We have made Wisconsin a national cause. We've inspired 450,000 people to contribute to our state party, tens of thousands of people inside and outside Wisconsin to volunteer, and we have unrigged our state. We unrigged our maps and flipped 14 state legislative seats this year with Leader Hasselbein, who's here with us today, in the state Senate. We're on track for a Democratic trifecta. And that's the kind of fight and energy that our Democratic National Committee needs. I'm running because I believe that when we fight, when we organize, when we show people we're on their side, then we can make the Democratic Party the white-hot center of a rebirth of American progress and greatness. That is what we need to do, and that's what I'm here to do.
Ms. Williamson?
Thank you, Dolly. I'm not here because I'm loyal to the Democratic Party or to the chairmanship of the DNC. I'm here because I'm loyal to the United States of America, to our democracy, and to our Constitution. This is bigger than the Democratic Party. This is about the survival of our republic. I recognize what a threat Donald Trump is, and I recognize that in order to meet that, we have to throw out the old playbook. My goal is not to be like Ron Brown, as much as I respected him, and we remember him, of course, with love and memory, or Bob Strauss. My goal is to be like Frances Perkins, the first labor secretary of the United States of America, because she stood for the working people of the United States. She was in line with the labor movement of the United States, which is our biggest bulwark against the assault of unfettered capital. That is what Donald Trump represents. Last night, when the president warned us about a coming oligarchy, I'm afraid that oligarchy has been with us for a while. And in order to defeat those forces, it's going to take more than infrastructure. And I know about infrastructure. I founded an organization during the AIDS crisis that has fed 18 million meals to people who are homebound with AIDS. I have founded nonprofits. I have raised millions of dollars. I know how important the ground game is, but we need an air game. We need to excite people. We don't need to go out and convince them that we can do something. We need to answer to the yearning out there. People are afraid of what Donald Trump is going to do to their lives, and they have every right to be afraid.
Thank you.
And we need to be showing them every single day. This is what the Democrats are doing for you today in the House and in the Senate and in your state houses. This is what the Democrats are fighting for. This is why what we are fighting for is relevant to your life, is applicable to your circumstances. We're going to get you health care. We're going to get you the ability to work at one job and survive and support your family. We're going to get you a clean environment. We're going to get you a place to live. We're going to do all that. And the quid pro quo is you're going to be out there and you're going to be the most amazing citizen and the most amazing America. And that's how we're going to rebuild this country.
Mr. Paul.
I'm running for the entire ecosystem. I'm not just running to be chair of one institution. You talked about Future Forward, you talk about our super PACs. It's one giant big ecosystem, and I'm running to hopefully be as in charge of all of it as I can be, because I've been a part of that ecosystem at all levels of it, from local parties to the para-party of outside groups to sort of being a thinker on these subjects. That is why I'm running. But I think the most important thing the Democratic Party can do right now is return to a path towards empathy. I think as a party, we are no longer putting ourselves in a situation where we think about the people who we want something from. And I think that because we're no longer thinking about the people who we want something from, we're not getting that from them. So it starts with, if you want to do college organizing, it takes 14 months because you have to get the students 1 year and 2 months before they have to vote, not in the next year. We don't get on their timetable. We try and get them on our timetable, it doesn't work. And then we say, that's why college kids don't work. I remember volunteering on a congressional special election where the staffers showed up and they started to laugh because so many calls were made that meant that the staffers were succeeding in their mission of talking to people. And the fact that the voters didn't like it, well, that was funny because that meant that didn't matter. They weren't going to not vote for us. I remember as organizing with a major DNC contractor who does field work, paid canvassing, the staffers told me I wanted to get my staffers water because it was 90 degrees out. And they said that it would be nice if we had water, but that wasn't required. And as I've seen all these things, it's become incredibly clear to me that we don't approach the people who are going to be this party and build this party with the empathy that we need to. And if we don't approach them with the empathy that we need to, why would they ever want to help us?
Thank you. Mr. Snyder.
Well, first, I mean, about the question about going back again to anything, I think that belongs with another party. I want to look forward and not go back to that history. So I think one of the things that we really need to do, and while we're talking about, yes, while largely I agree we need to do all this organizing and we need to find the model that works, I think we need to go a step further, and that is inward. Look, I come from national security. I came from years combating domestic terrorism. I came from years of dealing with mis and disinformation. And we heard from President Biden just last night, an avalanche of mis and disinformation is headed our way, asymmetrical threats, and yes, an emboldened right that is going to come after us in our communities, and we're already seeing it. So we can't do more of the same. We need to fundamentally change on how we look at the threat, how we address it, and transform the party into a modern organizing machine that, yes, use cutting edge technology, yes, uses new analytics. But until any of that is possible, we need to look inward. And I've listened to DNC members as I've called across the country. We need to actually look inward and fess up to our mistakes. We need to fess up and look at the things that we need to mend. Yes, is there angst out there that certain demographics, whether it's black women, working people, Latinos, youth, have been overlooked and taken for granted as voters in our past? And the answer is yes. So we need to come to terms with that first, because morale is low and we know what's coming and there is a tangible fear. So unless we actually come to the table, have those hard and tough conversations, then we're not going to be able to mobilize. Okay, I've learned this from talking to everybody. That malaise is out there. And so we need to take this crisis first, and we need to turn it into a movement. And that starts in this room. That starts with empowering the DNC members. That comes with listening and actually walking the walk and making sure that when people have ideas, we move on them and we turn into a party of actually action.
Mr. Snyder, thank you very much. I want to turn now to the nature of the job and how you look at the job. Do you see yourself as somebody that would be a forward-facing spokesman for the party, somebody who quite literally would lead the Democratic Party? Or is that something that you believe that Senator Schumer, Leader Jeffries, the governors should do? Or do you view this role as more organized, more behind the scenes, more of a tactical role to organize the state parties and national parties to win elections? We'll start with Governor O'Malley.
I think it's both, Jonathan. I mean, we have great leaders in our party, all across our party. Some of them that we don't incorporate into the urgent work of communicating to people who feel like we're not talking to them are the ones that are the best at it. America's Democratic governors, America's Democratic mayors. And so part of this job is, in fact, organizing our leaders around the message. My first day of the 100-day plan is to reassert our party's commitment to the economic security, health, and well-being of every man, woman, and child in America. That's our party's purpose for being. And as we do that, yes, the DNC chair must organize. We are going to stand up in the first 100 days, a new center of digital, a center of excellence in digital communications. We're going to create an action stat table that every 2 weeks drives the important things that all of us acknowledge need to be done in terms of registering voters and recruiting candidates. So,
we're going to move on,
Jonathan.
Governor. Yeah, go ahead. Chair Martin, go ahead. Go ahead.
I agree with Governor O'Malley. It's not an either or, it's a both end. And as it relates to, the spokesperson for the party, the reality is we've got a deep bench a very deep bench of governors, congressional members. Of course, you mentioned our leaders. We have folks who are dealing with issues at the local level. I mean, who better to talk about public safety than our mayors? Who better to talk about disaster relief than county commissioners? Who better to talk about education funding and other issues on the state level than our governors, right? And so we have to tap into the rich diversity of elected officials we have throughout this country who are actually delivering on our party values right now. You know, the DNC chair is just one spokesperson, but we have so many other spokespeople out there that we should be tapping into. And I say instead of sending celebrities out, we should send workers out to talk to workers. We should send out other folks out to talk that are trusted messengers and validators. And let me tell you what I believe my role in the Minnesota DFL has been as it relates to being a spokesperson. I've always said this to my elected officials. My job is to get out there and define the Republicans. I will take the low road so they can take the high road. I will throw the punches so they don't have to. And we will go on the offense against Donald Trump. That's the role that I will play as spokesperson, and I will also be the organizer in chief for our party.
Thank you. Chair Wickler.
Ken's point is great. We have an extraordinary bench, and the DNC chair has to communicate a clear vision and strategy for the party that gets people to want to get involved. Where our candidates are the people who carry the message to voters. A DNC chair needs to energize volunteers, needs to inspire people to run for office, needs to inspire people to donate, needs to lift people up. Then we need to mobilize. And that means building a strategy in each state, not just a 50-state strategy to send each state a check. And states need checks to keep the lights on in their state parties. But it's working with governors, with the Senate candidates and committees and the House candidates and committees to make Leader Jeffries, Speaker Jeffries. It's working with down-ballot folks to make a game plan for each state that looks at each year. Wisconsin Supreme Court race this spring, New Jersey and Virginia this fall, across the country, so that we know where the fight is. And then we fight that fight in a way that people can see and feel. And the DNC is going to be mobilizing millions of people to get involved as volunteers, as activists, as messengers in their own communities and their own networks. And that's across race and ethnicity all across the country. And that takes money. And that's the last thing, and it's worth saying, because this stuff doesn't happen on the cheap. We're going to need to inspire millions of people to contribute. And the only way we do that is if they trust that we'll use their money well. That means we do not go in agreeing to existing contracts being extended forever with whoever happens to have had a relationship in the past. We start with a full audit of everyone who works with the party and only spend in a way that reflects our values and the path to victory. And if we do that, people will know that their dollars will turn into action, will turn into victory, will turn into change.
Thanks, Chairman Wickler. Let me follow up on that, actually, with Chairman Martin, because you raised the issue of donors and raising money. And Chairman Martin, you've obviously raised the topic of your colleague from Wisconsin's connection to the donors of the Democratic Party. I guess my question is that a bad thing that he has connections to Democratic donors? I mean, isn't that a key role? And that knowing folks like Reid Hoffman and George Soros, is that an asset or a liability, do you think?
Well, I think let me just say this. I think Ben's done an amazing job in Wisconsin. He's moved the needle. He's helped to build. He's raised the money to do that. I also have raised the money in my state. He's raised about $230. I've raised about $220 million for my state party, right? I also happen to serve on the finance committee for the Harris-Walz campaign. So in addition to the $30 million I raised last year for my party, I raised $6 million for our presidential candidate. There's no one on this stage that can say that. In addition to the work that I did at the ASDC to travel throughout the country, visiting all 50 states, 40 states just in the last year alone. As it relates to donors, of course we need to raise money, right? The question is, from who are you raising money, right? And I think it's important. Yes, at the end of the day, we need to raise money. We've both done that. But we also need to raise money from people who share our values. Both Ben and I do that. We raise a lot of money from small donations, and that's what the DNC needs to continue to do. I don't criticize him for the money he's raised. He's done an amazing job there, right? But I will just say that two of the donors you mentioned, the concern that a lot of state parties had, if I'm being really honest with you, Jonathan, is that one of those donors tried to stand up an organization called Alloy to essentially take state parties' voter files away. And so I want to be really clear.
Reid Hoffman.
But let me just say, this is not about raising money. I'm really proud of what Ben's done in Wisconsin, and all state parties are doing a good job of raising money, and the DNC needs to do that.
Yeah. Ben, you respond to that?
I appreciate the kind words. And anyone who's running for DNC chair should be able to raise dollars. And the key thing is that you raise dollars to do things that help us win. When it came to Alloy, my argument has always been that state parties need to own their data. So even if someone disagrees with me about something else, I will say, look, why don't you donate to parties to help us win elections for folks up and down the ballot? And I've persuaded donors who'd never considered supporting state parties, not just to support the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, but other state parties across the country. The way that we've raised more money in about half the time in Wisconsin relative to Minnesota, or I believe any other Democratic state party in the country, is by taking fights national, by making the case across the country that if you chip in, and for 450,000 people, it is small dollar contributions. I believe more than any other Democratic state party in the country. Again, that if you chip in, then fights about things that you care about to your core, that we can make the difference by stretching every dollar and making the biggest difference we possibly can. That inspires people to get involved. That makes people want to spread the word and be proud that they were involved in that fight. And frankly, a lot of the time when you donate to a Democratic campaign or cause it doesn't feel that inspiring. It feels a little bit like, oh my gosh, I clicked that link. And I think we can change that by making it thrilling and exciting to be a part of this movement. That's what I've done in Wisconsin. That's what I'll do at the DNC. And I think that's what we can work together to make being a part of this party a part of people's identity that they are proud of because they know that we deliver results.
Thank you, Mr. Wickler. Ms. Williamson, let me bring you in here on a broader question. Is the point of the party, do you think, to be fair to all candidates or to win general elections in the fall?
I'm right. It's to be fair to all candidates. And when we are not fair to all candidates, we are going against our own bylaws. For instance, the bylaws of the DNC are that the party would not be deciding who the candidate should be. We should be the Democratic Party. The role of the party is to facilitate democracy, not to engineer it or to manipulate it. That's number one. Number two, given the fact that we do not have the White House, we do not have the House, and we do not have the Senate, the DNC has a very, very important role this time that it doesn't always have, and that is to be the spectacular megaphone for the Democratic Party. The governors are busy in their states. The senators are busy in the House, in the Senate. The House people are busy in the House. What I would do as the chair of the DNC is help the American people connect the dots and see the larger story of this country and where the Democratic Party fits in. The Democratic Party has swayed from its moral mission. We have lost our prophetic voice. We have strayed from the traditional values, and that is, more than anything else, advocacy, unequivocal advocacy for the working people of the United States of America. I want to make the story of our party as it is being lived on any given day real for people. We will use new media. We will create new media. We will be in every precinct. We will be in every county. We will be in every city. We will be in every state. We will take all this money that is concentrated, the money and the power in the hands of a few people in Washington and the consultancy class. We'll push it out. The consultancy contracts will go to local communities, and we will be on the ground, and we will be talking to people who hurt the most. I'm more interested in the people who can't make it on just one job. I'm interested in the people who are selling their plasma in order to survive. I'm interested in the people who are so underinsured or uninsured that they are putting GoFundMe pages on the internet for life-saving operations for themselves and their children.
Dr. Hathaway,
we have to get back to the humanitarian mission of the Democratic Party.
More defined by being fair to all candidates or winning general elections in the fall?
Could you restate the question, please?
Is your vision for the national party more shaped by being fair to all candidates or winning the general election? Which is more important, do you think?
I think we ought not segment it out to just simply be those two things, but a combination of both. We have to win primary elections as well as have a host of candidates to recruit, as well as put them up to run in primary elections, as well as win general elections sweepingly across this country. That is going to take a substantial amount of work. We need an army of volunteers that are willing to do the work, as well as an army of lawyers. I cannot emphasize that enough. Litigation is going to be one path forward in order for us to reattain power and for us to win court cases that break the bounds of racial and partisan gerrymandering in this country. Seats have been taken from us at local, state, and federal levels because of racial and partisan gerrymandering. When it comes to the litigation piece, when we pass as a party, local, state, and federal, and enshrined into law the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act, that will position us as a party to not just lead every 2 years or 4 years, but 14, 40 years, a long-lasting Democratic Party. That is what I envision. That will be the expectation if given the opportunity and blessing to be the next DNC chair. We're going to chart some new paths forward to lead as a party, not just today, but into the future.
Tasha?
Democrats suffered a serious blow in this election. You've all mentioned it. I believe Chair Martin mentioned that he wanted to do a full review of what happened in 2024. So why don't we start that here tonight? It seems clear that voters around the country wanted change, and the results indicate that voters felt the Democratic Party wasn't listening. Did President Biden staying in the race as long as he did not only hurt the party's chances at winning, but also potentially damage the brand of the party at the same time? Chair Martin, let's start with you.
Well, it's an academic exercise. We cannot change the past. So, the reality is all we can do is look back and help us inform the future. And that's what I want to do. There's some people who talk about an autopsy or a postmortem. Our party is not dead. It's still alive and kicking, right? And let me tell you, we have to learn the right lessons for sure, and we need to do that post-election review. But what you said about the perceptions of this party is absolutely right. Last spring, and it should have been the canary in the coal mine, the red flag for all of us as Democrats, and it was missed by so many. For the first time in modern history, the perceptions of the two political parties has changed. The majority of Americans now believe that the Republican Party best represents the interests of the working class and the poor, and the Democratic Party is a party of the wealthy and the elites. That is a damning indictment on our party. That's not who we are. That's never been who we are. And the reality is that perception and feeling, of course, impacted the election because we saw that we lost ground with so many people within our Big Tent coalition who moved away from our party because they don't feel like we're fighting for them anymore. Let me tell you what it's not a problem. It's not a problem of our message, because in Missouri, this last fall, they voted for a minimum wage increase, a paid family leave bill. They voted for abortion protections, all by wide margins, yet those same voters went down the ballot and voted for Trump and Republicans. It's a messaging problem because they're supporting policies that Democrats champion, yet they're not connecting them back to their own lives and to our party and to our candidates. So we have to fix our brand, because clearly people don't feel like we're fighting for them anymore. And part of that is focusing on a working class agenda that gives people a sense that we haven't forgotten about them, and we're going to fight for their lives no matter where they're from, no matter who they love, no matter where they live. We are going to be the champion for everyone in this country again, because that's who the Democratic Party is.
Chair Martin, I want to follow up on that, and you'll have 30 seconds. You answered part of my question, but specifically President Biden, should he have dropped out sooner, and did him not dropping out sooner hurt the brand for voters we're talking about?
It's an academic exercise that's not even worth answering, because we can't change the past. The only thing we can do is focus on the future, and that's the lessons that I'm interested in learning from this last election. It does none of us any good to hypothesize about what could have happened if Joe Biden dropped out earlier, because we can't. It's not going to help inform the future. For me,
this is a hard question,
right.
And if you're not willing to answer those hard questions, how can you?
I am answering it, which is by we need to make sure that we are doing the type of introspection we need as a party to get to why people left our party, why they didn't show up. 19 million voters that voted for Joe Biden did not show up in 2024, right? And a number of groups moved away from us.
Martin, we're out of time. Thank you very much. Governor O'Malley, same question to you.
By day 5 of my first 100 days, I will appoint an after-action review. I also choose not to call it an autopsy, and I also choose not to engage in your questions that I'm sure will be something that history books will study. But I will say this. There is great loss of trust in our party and people that volunteer, people who contribute. And we owe it to them. We can't restore trust unless we acknowledge where we fell down and unless we share with people why we spent money on messaging that didn't work when there were other messages that did. So we owe it to our party. We owe it to our country to do that deep dive and to do that after action. And it'll be completed within 60 days. And then we can learn and move forward.
Thank you, Governor. Ms. Williamson, same question to you. And I ask because this is a question that voters do talk about and do wonder about.
Should Biden have dropped out sooner?
Yes, ma'am.
It should have been irrelevant when he dropped out. The idea that we don't primary an incumbent president was a lie. It was promulgated on purpose. I'm old enough to remember when Eugene McCarthy primaried Lyndon Johnson. Robert Kennedy Sr. primaried Lyndon Johnson. Nobody thought it was weird. We just thought it was democracy. Incumbent senators and congresspeople and mayors are primaried all the time. That was very important, by the way, because their primarying Johnson got Johnson to drop out. The problem was the DNC saying, oh, we're not going to have a primary, and we see our role as supporting the president's renomination, once again, in contradiction to their own bylaws. And the fact that so many traditional Democratic voters went along with this. We used to be the party of the free thinkers. Anyone who's ever taken civics class in the 7th grade knows you're not a spoiler if you're in a primary. For a year and a half, the Republicans were giving their message, and we were silent because the DNC was acting like a suppressant. Nobody can talk. We all have to vote for Joe Biden. We all have to vote for Joe Biden. Why? Because the DNC said so. Why? And the fact that people had such a codependent thrall, if I'm the leader of the DNC, I don't want you to feel you have to do whatever I say. We don't have a king in the White House, and we don't have an elite at the DNC who's supposed to be determining what Democrats are thinking. The fact that we're messy is part of the strength of the Democratic Party. The fact that we all have different ideas is our strength. And if we had had a primary, if people had shown up, if people like myself hadn't been thrown off ballots and our campaigns infiltrated and de-amplified on television stations such as MSNBC and CNN, where if you're not there, the Democratic electorate doesn't even know you exist, then we would have worked it out. The Democrats would have worked it out. We would have spent a year and a half. What are we going to do to beat Trump? What are we going to do to beat Trump? The Democratic Party, by suppressing that primary, opened the door and let Donald Trump.
But let me ask those on the stage here. Show of hands, does anyone disagree with Ms. Williamson on her point about the process? Does anyone on the stage disagree with Ms. Williamson about the process? Mr. Paul.
Our problem is we trusted you all. Your job was to inform the American people about what was going on in this country. But instead of informing the American people about what's going on in this country, you asked the same kind of gotcha questions that I am so sick and tired of hearing from journalists in this country. Joe Biden did a good job as president. He got good things done. And none of you ever said it because you wanted to ask, what's wrong with Joe Biden today? What's wrong with Joe Biden today? What's wrong with Joe Biden today? And because the media didn't inform the American people about what was going on, it became impossible for us to get any message out. And because we couldn't get any message out, nobody knew what we did. And that's why we lost the damn election. It is your people's fault. And I'm sick of it. I'm sorry.
Ms. Williamson?
If I had $1 billion, I would take CNN and MSNBC to court. And I would ask, not that I would win that case, but I would ask, did someone from the DNC have a conversation with you about de-amplifying any candidates, even qualified candidates other than Joe Biden? It shouldn't qualify. The political media industrial complex in this country calls a qualified candidate someone who is qualified to perpetuate the system as it is. The people have rejected that system. Qualifications have been determined by James Madison. If you were born here, if you're 35 years or older, and if you have lived here for 14 years, you are qualified. I'd also like to add that myself, not a political insider, that is my qualification. That's the good news, not the bad news. Somebody who's seeing things from a different perspective with a different set of
let me ask you this. Do you believe Biden should have been the nominee? And do you think that the process that Ms. Williamson is criticizing was the wrong way to do this thing?
I will say, we're 4 days away from Trump's inauguration.
Yeah.
And we can disagree about all kinds of things about the past, but the fundamental question is, what do we do now? And what we need to do is we need to unite and fight for working people against an administration that is going to try to divide us and rip us all off. Now, we're going to have a primary in 2028. And my commitment as chair, and I hope everyone's commitment, if any of us is elected chair, is to have a process that gives everyone a fair shake, that gives everyone a shot, that is neutral from the perspective of the DNC, so that it is voters who are making the decision. And as we set our primary calendar, I don't think a DNC chair should be putting their thumb on the scale. I think we should ask DNC members to hear states out as they make their case, and we should set a calendar that gives everyone a chance, chooses a winning nominee, and honors our traditions and our coalition. That is a decision the DNC has to make going forward, because we don't have a time machine. The other decision we have is whether we lie down or whether we stand and fight. And that is the decision that we need to answer with an affirmative battle cry, because the battle is about to be upon us. Over this spring, we have Wisconsin Supreme Court election. We have special elections in Florida to fill Matt Gaetz's seat and Elise Stefanik's seat. We're going to have a series of local elections and special elections across the country. And if we organize as a Democratic Party, if we expand the circle of people that we work with and communicate with, if we show up on all the places where people never heard from us, because we lost the most from the people who never heard from Democrats in this election, if we do that work, then we're going to start winning elections, and we're going to build a party that people can see themselves in. That is the challenge. That is a forward-looking challenge that we have to answer. And that is the work that we need to be doing as we do that after action review, to inform a battle plan that allows us to win and make a difference in people's lives.
Thank you, Mr. Wickler.